Hi, I'm Tina Piermarini. Welcome to Tina Cooks Lite. This season we're going to switch things up a little bit and we're going to cook light, quick, delicious food. We're going to start this evening out with a butternut squash soup that's going to be just delicious, light in calories. We're going to have summer squash, zucchini, and pork, and we're going to make a wonderful dish with that. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start out with our butternut squash soup. You need a nice butternut squash, of course. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut it up and we're going to peel it. Whoops, there goes my peeler. We're trying something different. Doesn't mean my cooking style has changed at all. I'm still a klutz in the kitchen at times. Okay, I like to cut this up a little bit so that it's easier to peel, because this can be a nightmare to peel. And cut. So we're going to cut it up a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start peeling. And we're going to put everything in the bowl. Now, for this soup, I'm going to have butternut squash, celery, carrots, onions, garlic, okay? Because you want your soup to taste like something. We're not going to be using any heavy cream or, you know, sour cream or anything like that, because that's where all your fat and calories come in. I am going to use a little bit of olive oil, and there's nothing wrong with that because that's a heart-healthy oil. And heart-healthy oils are good for you. Not gallons of it. No, you want to start out with maybe a tablespoon or so. You don't want to have a lot of olive oil in there. Just enough to give it a taste. Okay, so now we've got our butternut squash in the bowl, which is cool. I'm just going to clean this up just a little bit, get it out of the way here. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut up some celery, because celery is going to add a nice little salty flavor to it. You don't have to, you know, make it small, just chunks like the butternut squash is good. Like this, you're going to chop it up. That's going to give it a nice little bit of salt. And then we have our carrots, which our carrots are going to add a little bit of sweetness to it too. Now, you can make it just plain butternut squash, but then I don't think it quite takes into, it's not quite a soup to me. So I like to add a few other vegetables with it, because you're not adding a rich cream or a sour cream or anything like that. So you need to give it flavors with something else. So I like to use carrots and onions and celery. But you can use your favorite stock if you have one. Or you can make it yourself. Okay, so now we're going to go with our onion. And the same thing with the onion. You don't have to make small little cuts, because we're just going to be chopping it up and putting it in the bowl and cooking it down. There we go. Get the little skins off. The skins on that one. And then we're just going to cut them into cubes like that. And then we have our garlic, which you can't have a soup without garlic. I'm sorry, you just can't. I love it. We're just going to crush these down and peel them back, because we don't even have to cut those. They're just going to melt. When we're done the process of the soup, we're just going to puree it. So everything is going to be pureed together. So now that I have all this all ready, we're going to go over to the stove and we're going to put the soup in the pot. Let's go. All right, now we're going to start at the stove and we're going to put our heat on high. Now, this is olive oil, 100% olive oil. Now, I'm not going to use a ton of olive oil. I'm probably going to use maybe a tablespoon and just coat the bottom of the pan, because I want to see, I just want to keep it light. I don't want to have a ton of olive oil in there, but I want to be able to have a little bit of flavor from the olive oil. And then we're going to take our vegetables and we're going to just dump them in here. Let me do it this way. We're just going to dump them right in here like this. Okay. Put this out of the way. Got my moppina. Wipe my hands off. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to season And I'm going to use some salt. Okay. You want to season up our... This salt I bought is huge. The grains on it are giant. So I have to be really careful how much I use, because the first time I started using it, it was so big that the food was so salty it was killing me. All right, this is a table ground pepper. We're going to put some pepper in here. Like that. And of course we're going to use some granulated garlic. Now, I've made this soup where I've used sage in it, fresh sage out of my garden. Delicious, it's wonderful. I'm not going to use sage though this time, but you can use it with sage. Just going to mix this around a little bit, like that. Then we're going to take, this is just a vegetable broth. It's 100% fat-free, no monosodium glutamate. And we're going to throw it in there like this. Now I always buy a couple of cans because you don't know when you're pureeing it sometimes, or when it's cooking, it's not enough juice. I don't like it pasty thick. I like it nice and smooth and creamy. And it will get creamy without adding cream or sour cream or anything. Now this is the base of our soup. That should only take you like maybe 10, 15 minutes, not even to throw together. The thing is, it does have to cook. This will cook for about 20 minutes till everything's nice and soft. So in 20 minutes we'll come back. This is going to come to a boil. You're going to bring it to a boil, and then you're going to lower it down to a medium simmer so that it's boiling. You don't want it like down, medium. So we're going to let this go, and we'll be back to check it. Alright, so now we're going to start with our pork. Everything's on a nice low simmer. Now this is a pork tenderloin, lean cut of meat. You're not going to find any fat inside. So what we're doing right now is, this is all silver skin and, you know, fat. So we're going to trim this off. We don't want this in our food. Not good. It's not going to taste good. And the silver skin that I'm going to take off, I'll show you, makes the meat very tough. It's very chewy, and you just don't want it on there. It's just right here. See, this is very chewy. It's kind of gross. There we go. Just take it right off. This is a boning knife. Comes in very handy. It's a very handy dandy tool. Okay. Now over here we've got a little bit of fat here. Of course, don't stab yourself with the boning knife like I just did. No blood though. That's a good thing. Okay. And I'm also going to cut out this little bit of fat right here. I don't want this in our food either. It's like a little yuckiness that we're going to get rid of. There we go. Okay, so now, I guess we're going to cut this off. This is a really good trim. Alright, so I'm going to take this, and I'm going to cut like little medallions, like so. Okay, I'm going to lay them on my dish, and they're not too thin, but they're not real thick either. These cook out really nice. Now I do this a lot with pork cutlets. You can use these for pork cutlets, but we're going to use these for medallions in a nice saute with zucchini and summer squash. They're going to be delicious. But as you can see, the meat in here, there really is no fat. It's a very lean meat. And one thing that I found when I was, oh, that's a piece of wrapper. Make sure I get all that out of there. When I started on my weight loss quest, so to speak, I realized that I did not eat enough healthy, good proteins, like lean pork and lean beef. I love my sausage and all that other stuff, but it's not probably the best proteins for you to have. And I love pasta and stuff like that, which really you should have at least 4-5 ounces of good protein for supper. I found, you know, if you want to have your vegetables and stuff at lunchtime, that's great, but at night you need a nice sturdy dose of protein. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is take this with me, put it in the sink here, and wash my hands. Okay? Then what I'm going to do is take this knife out of the way, because I used it for the pork, flip the board, because we don't want the pork on the vegetables. And we're going to start with our vegetables. And the first thing I'm going to do is an onion. And I'm going to slice these kind of thin, because I kind of want them to melt a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to pull this off. I'm going to push this to the side over here, like that. Got my moppina to wipe my hands off. And we're going to just slice, just like this. They don't have to be perfect, thin slices, but I like them a little bit thin. All right. I try not to talk too much when I'm slicing because sometimes I lose parts of my finger. It's good to concentrate when you're slicing. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do is our garlic. Okay. Boy, that's a thick garlic. And we're going to pull off the skin. And I'm going to cut off that little end because that's not, I don't like that. And we're going to chop this up. Okay, and we're just going to keep chopping. Ooh, this garlic is strong. Okay. Oh, my eyes are watering, Carl, that's so strong. Between the onions and the garlic. Woohoo! Okay, and the next thing we're going to do is our zucchini and summer squash. I'm going to start out with the summer squash. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to cut it in half. And I'm going to slice it this way so that it's nice slices. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing with this side. Okay, and we're going to cut this one in half and do the same thing. I want some nice slices. And then I'm going to take these slices and I'm going to turn them this way because I like my food to be bite size. I don't want to have to, you know, be cutting all my food up when I'm eating it. I just want to, after I've cooked, I want to get to business and eat. All right, and we're going to put our our summer squash in here like this. And then we're going to do the same thing with our zucchini. Cut it in half and slice. Okay, we'll cut these down too. That way it's nice and even. Now this meal, of course I'm demonstrating, you know, different things, but it should take you no more than half an hour to do this meal I chopped that wrong, between the rice and the pork. The actual meal shouldn't take you more than a half an hour because you can start your soup and get that cooking, and that takes about 20 minutes. Then you puree it. You know, your rice takes about 20 minutes, and while that's all getting ready, you get this stuff prepared. You do all your preparation ahead, and you're ready to go. And this really should only take about 15 minutes put together. So I'm gonna clean up this mess, go over to the stove, and we'll start cooking. Okay? Okay, now I'm checking my vegetables here. My carrots are still a little bit hard, but that's coming along nicely. Okay, so now we're gonna get started on our pork dish. Don't really have a name for it, so I'm going to call it pork and vegetables. Now, ordinarily, I would start out with olive oil and butter, and we are going to use a little bit of olive oil because, like I said, it's a hot, healthy oil. But what I also do so that it doesn't stick is I use a non-spray cooking pan, non-stick cooking spray. I can't talk today. And we're going to use just a little bit of olive oil, like a tablespoon or two. Very little. We're going to swirl it around our pan so that it coats our pan nice, nice, nice. And I'm going to let our pan get a little bit hot. I'm going to throw in half of my garlic in the pan. And I'm going to throw in half of my onions. And why am I throwing in half? Because I want to get some flavor in the pan for my pork, okay? So that the pork has a little bit of flavoring in there. And then I'm going to save the other half for the zucchini and the summer squash with the tomatoes. I'm going to leave this on nice and high. Okay. Now I'm just going to let these get going a minute, okay? Okay, so now these are going to continue to cook. I am going to put my pork in the pan. Now I've got these cut about maybe an inch, okay? Because I like them to, you want to be able to taste your meat. You know what I'm saying? You want to be able to have a piece of meat. I'm going to put these all in the pan. Now, ordinarily I would put flour and seasonings on these. No flour. Believe it or not, a little bit of flour here, a couple of tablespoons of butter there. If you start adding that to every meal like I used to do, it adds up by the end of the day, or, by the end of the week. So I find that if you cut out a little bit here and there and you're not using butter all the time and flour and all the stuff that, white flour especially, that, adds calories, it automatically cuts down the calories to your food. Now we're going to season our pork up a little bit because that's got to taste like something. Alright, so we're going to use the stone salt over here that's so big. I don't really like it, but I got to use it up because I bought it. We're going to do some granulated garlic on it, even though I do have some garlic in there, because the pork isn't going to taste like anything. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to taste like anything. So we got to season it. And I'm going to put some coarse pepper on there. That'll make it nice and hot. And I am going to throw a little bit of parsley. When I do the vegetables, I'm going to use basil. Now, or basilgo, we call it basilgo. When I use my basil, I got to run to the freezer because I still have basil from my garden last summer. Because I rolled it or I put it in baggies and I saved it. And I saved myself all that expense of buying, basil. And that's what I love to do with my seasonings. And I still have sage too, which is really good. I love sage. So we're just going to let these get brown on this side and then brown on the other side. Just going to let them go. I got my burner on high. Not yet, almost. Now I want these to have a little bit of color on each side because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pork out of here and I'm going to put the vegetables in where the pork cooks so that it's got some of the flavor from the pork too. Alright, so I'm going to turn these around, let them get a little brown on the other side. These cook fairly quick too. They don't take a long time to cook. Oh, I remember the last time I used a pork loin on a cooking show. It was pork patari. And it was all Ahoya with Romano cheese and all. It was delicious. But this is going to be very delicious too. Yep. Okay, we're going to let that brown on that side. Now, I went and get myself a new dish because I can't use the same dish I had the pork in. Now that it's cooked, I got to use a different dish. And I'm going to need, and I hate to do this, but I need a cover so that I can cover my pork so that it stays warm while I'm doing my vegetables. Okay. We're just about there. I don't want to cook them all the way because I want to set them in the juice and let them, get really good that way. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to take these out because they've browned on both sides, maybe 3-4 minutes on each side. Okay? And we're going to line them up over here. That side's got all the seasoning. As you can see, it still has it. Alright. Go. Now I am going to leave these onions and garlic in here because that isn't going to bother anybody. Okay. Okay, I'm going to cover these up. Alright. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw the rest of my onions and garlic in here, like so, okay? Now instead of throwing more olive oil in here, which would add more calories to it, I'm going to just get these going with a little bit more vegetable stock, okay? And I'm going to let those actually simmer a little bit, and as the stock boils out, it's going to pick up all the flavor from the pork that's cooked in there. You can see the color of the stock from the pork. Okay, then we're going to throw in some diced tomatoes. Now these are just diced tomatoes with garlic and oil, just like that. We're going to do that. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to run over to my freezer real quick, because I want to throw in some basil in here, because that'll give it a nice flavor too. See, here's my little Ziploc bag with my frozen basil. The only thing is, you can't put this out on the counter and let it sit, because what happens is it starts to thaw and it gets mushy. So when you freeze basil or parsley or sage like this, and you put it in Ziploc bags and you use it this way, you have to literally take it out of the freezer just before you're going to put it in what you cook. Okay, so we're going to bump this up so that it's boiling. We want it to come to a simmer, because I really want this juice to evaporate after a while. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in my zucchini and my summer squash. Okay. Now, I have my vegetables in here. I need to re-season. Even though I have the seasoning left from the pork, it's not going to be enough to season this up. I'm going to use a little bit of salt, because I try to keep my salt intake down. And like I said, I got the colossal salt over here. I'm going to use a little bit more pepper. Okay. And I'm going to use some granulated garlic. So now really, if you think about it, what do I have in here really for all? I have, what, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And that's basically the fat that I have in there, the calories of the fat. Otherwise, I would have had butter and everything else. It's not necessary, not to get a good flavor anyways. Although I still do add butter to stuff once in a while. Every so often you gotta have that cheat, because if you don't eat what you like sometimes, then you just become, you gotta have, it gets obsessive. So now we're gonna let this cook. I'm gonna cover this up a little bit. We're gonna let this simmer for a good 10 minutes, and then we'll be ready to put our pork back in, and we'll be back. Okay, I'm going to take the marpina off, and we're going to put the marpina on the table, because now our soup is ready. So we're going to puree our soup. Oh, it's going to be so good. We're going to shut it off, and I'm going to grab, actually using pot holders today instead of frying my fingers off. I found that when you use pot holders, it's very helpful. You don't burn yourself so much. So now we're just going to ladle in our vegetables like so. Okay, they're nice and tender and delicious. Okay, throw in a little bit of broth there. And then we're just going to turn this on and puree. Okay, now see, that's thick. So I'm just going to put in a little more vegetable stock to bring it down to where I want it. All right. Oh yeah, look at that. Beautiful, beautiful. Isn't that beautiful? Wonderful. Hot. Ooh, it's good. This is our wonderful butternut squash soup. Nice and light. It's going to be delicious. And we'll get back to our pork dish. So this is about almost done. Now what I want to do is I want to bring this to a boil so that I don't have all this tomato juice all over the place. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pork, because it's not really cooked all the way, and I'm going to set it in here, and I'm going to let it finish with the vegetables so that it gets the flavor of the tomatoes and the basil and the vegetables. And we're going to let this pork cook. I'm going to turn it over once. And then this is going to be finished. I want the water to reduce out of the tomatoes. Plus, the zucchini and the summer squash, believe it or not, produce a lot of water too. So we're just going to let this simmer. I'm going to check the rice. Thank you, Carl. I almost forgot about it. Now this rice, as you can see, I use 2 cups of water and 1 cup of rice. And that's ready to go. Now, I'm not going to put butter or cheese, again with the butter and cheese. I would butter and cheese that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the zucchini and the summer squash on top of the rice and the medallions so that it automatically has flavor. So you're not going to have a flat tasting rice on the side. Okay, so we're going to let this simmer and we'll be back in a few minutes to finish it up. Now, the most important thing about cooking and eating light is tools for proper management and weight. This ladle is one of my favorite ladles. It measures a ½ a cup of soup. All right? Stir it around a little bit. It's nice and hot. Now, when I come home from work, I usually have my soup in the refrigerator, and I myself up a cup of this soup. Okay? Now, while I'm cooking my meal, I eat my soup. And you want to know something? It's delicious. Excellent. The next thing you do is after you've had your snack, you have your meal. Now, ½ a cup of rice. That's what my personal count is. I use a ½ a cup of rice. Okay? I know everybody's saying to themselves, is she crazy? No, I'm not crazy. The reason why we have issues with overweight people is because we don't realize how much we eat when we're sitting down eating. The vegetables, I don't really worry about too much because if I'm going to fill with something, vegetables are a good filler. Now this pork, I'm going to go with about 3-4 ounces. So I'm going to take my pork and I'm going to put it on my scale. Naturally, it's dishwasher safe, thank God. Okay, that's one. Oh, one more little tiny piece. Believe it or not, this right here is 4 ounces of pork. So if you're eating more than that, you're overeating your pork, okay? I'm going to set this aside, and then I'm just going to take some of these wonderful vegetables and tomatoes, zucchini, summer squash, and I'm going to put them right on top like this, okay? I usually have about a ½ a cup or so, but like I said, vegetables are good for you. I don't really go crazy measuring those, but as you can see, I'm not overeating either. Then you press your little pork cutlets in there, little pork tenderloin things, just like that. Oh, wow. Now see, that looks like that's a delicious meal. Very light, low in calorie, and here we go. We're going to taste this too. Pork is nice and tender. All right, so now we're going to dig into our pork. I'm going to grab a little bit of rice, zucchini and summer squash. The basil gives it a nice sweet flavor, and I put a little bit of pepper in there to give it a kick, and that is a nice meal. And that is our first light Tina Cooks. Now, all of these recipes will be on my webpage and at tinacooks.com. And thank you for watching Tina Cooks Lite.